So tell me, what are the problems you're having with the child?
Well, he's just out of control. I mean, he never listens to me, and he pretty much runs my life.
Well, hi everyone, it's tmcleanful here again. And I was watching the recent interview Jordan Peterson did on Iceland's Channel 2 which is an awesome name, by the way. And while I was watching the interview, I suddenly had an idea. Now, hear me out. I know I recently said that I don't want to see this devolve into Jordan simply being sat down to some new flavor of true believer just to see what happens when they talk. With that said, and at the risk of sounding somewhat hypocritical, I think it would be really cool if Jordan Peterson sat down for an hour conversation with Cesar Millan. The reason why I think this would be cool is because, well, it's selfish reasons, first and foremost. Anyone who's familiar with this channel knows that I love dogs. You may also know that my sister runs a dog obedience camp. It's like a training camp for both dogs and owners. It's a very successful business with a lot of happy clients. She takes the Cesar Millan approach, but she also references academic sources as well. And I notice a lot of parallels in the kind of philosophical approach to discipline, both within their own families and in Cesar's case, in helping develop healthy, well-adjusted dogs. Another reason is because I've noticed that the people who have a problem with Jordan's statement about the flick to get a child's attention that's kind of headed towards the red line.
I want to ask you about the use of physical force on children, because you think it is important to allow kids to explore and harm themselves to gain experience. Still, you believe strict parenting is important, and you think it is justifiable to flick the index finger on certain types of 2-year-olds.
The criticism of that, calling it child abuse or whatever, it's the same kind of argument that's leveled against Cesar Millan for his tisk touch to the neck. And it's a ridiculous concern, but I noticed it's the same type of people who tend to come up with this problem, this issue they have. Also, it'd be cool to see them talk because Cesar's a very intelligent man, but he has obviously not been academically educated in the way Jordan Peterson has. And a lot of Cesar's critics, the people who attack him, will latch on to this fact. They'll point out that Cesar says pack leader instead of parental unit, or I prefer the term master. The fact is that dogs work so well with humans because we bred them over many generations to select puppy-like features so that they would retain them into adulthood. And that's why dogs tend to look to us as a parental figure. In a pack, the two pack leaders are essentially the alpha male and the alpha female. They're a coupled unit, and they are the parents of most of the pack members. It's really a family, and the dog looks to you in a similar way. It's looking to you to be that master. It's already written into the firmware. It just needs you to show it that you are that thing, and it will behave accordingly. I used the Cesar Millan approach to train Ziggy. I was spoiled with Ziggy because he's a border collie, and it took very little training. He seemed to pick up everything almost immediately in terms of where the rules, boundaries, and limitations were set. Today, what I do when I'm with Ziggy, and we are in a situation where I need his attention immediately for his own protection and for mine and for those around us, I give him a nudge with my leg. I just bend my foot over and I touch his side with my calf. And that's my tishk for Ziggy. And it tells him that whatever impulse he was about to struggle with, whatever anxiety he might be feeling in that moment, whatever decisions that he might be about to make on his own, it short circuits that process and reminds Ziggy to look to me in this situation because I'm the master and I have it. I have the situation under control. So I want you to watch a little bit of this interview, and I'm going to intercut it with some other material, and then we'll come back and talk a little more.
Why is the use of force justifiable in those situations?
Well, it depends on the context.
So the child needs to learn that he's not the most important person in the house.
You can stop talking behind my back. I'm right here, fruitcake.
See, I'm not looking at the child. I'm not acknowledging the child. I'm just letting the child know I'm not interested in him.
Not interested in me?
See, the child thinks your world revolves around him because it does. Because everything he does gets a response from you.
And it also depends on what you mean by force. There isn't a disciplinary strategy that you can utilize that doesn't involve something that's unpleasant, well, you can use reward, but that's a different, there's different circumstances under which, and you should use reward every time you can because it's more effective, but you often need something that's instantaneous and that gets the message across, and a flick is a very good technique.
I just use 2 fingers, nip at the child's neck. Doesn't hurt the child, just let him know I am dominant.
Number 1, that's not magic, okay? The thing is timing. It's the same thing as saying no. It's the same thing as giving affection to a dog. It's the same thing as giving a cookie to a dog. It's the same thing as pulling the leash at the right time. It's about timing, and it's also about the intensity. It's a sound that has to create an impact in the mind of a dog. But not because you use the sound, the dog is going to understand what you mean.
Have you accidentally ever him?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, it's part of our family. Yeah, actually, the thing is a Latino thing. My mom did it to me. Every Latino woman watched their children. That's something that I just brought from my country to America, and it's universal. That sound is used to children and animals, and where I'm from.
Look, Mexican, if you really think that you can knock it off.
See, I'm not validating his bad behavior with either negative or positive response.
Because it's instant, it's harmless, it gets the message across, you can use it publicly, it can't be misused, you won't hurt the child. And you have to have an effective disciplinary strategy for use in social situations, for example.
Oh, that's very interesting.
I think the first thing we need to work on is getting the child some exercise. He's fat and he has all this pent-up energy that we need to let him burn off. Do you take walks with your son?
Well, no, I don't.
Come on, take your son for a walk.
You're talking about the minimizing the use of...
Yeah, well, the basic rules are quite straightforward. Minimum number of rules, because otherwise the enforcement costs accrue, and you end up constraining yourself and the child too much. And then minimal necessary force. And you might ask, well, what's minimal necessary force? And the answer to that is minimum intervention necessary to bring the behavior to a halt as rapidly and harmlessly as possible. And that has to be negotiated with the child, because some children are much more difficult to stop than others.
So at this point, the editor and me wanted to insert a compilation or a montage of little children behaving terribly in public and their parents doing an awful and sometimes horrifying job of applying whatever discipline framework they've developed. And it occurred to me that these kids have already been up on YouTube. It's probably not been a good thing for them to have been highlighted in this way. I think any of us can go onto YouTube and bring ourselves up a compilation of little kids acting terribly and their parents responding terribly. So let's just skip that.
A lot of people in the airport said to me, Cesar, I do the thing and it doesn't work. Because they do it at the wrong time, or they do it too much, or they do it too loud, or they do it too soft.
I gotta catch him before he gets there.
But isn't it possible that the parent-child relationship can be damaged if basic trust and safety is lost?
Oh, it's absolutely the case that it will be damaged, yes. But the application of judicious disciplinary force doesn't damage the relationship, it actually strengthens it. And everyone knows this. Look, if you have a relationship with your wife, let's say, the relationship is partly based on mutual respect, not merely on mutual love. It's also based on mutual respect. And everyone tests out their partner to determine what their limits are. And if you're not subject to corrective action on the part of your partner, you will have no respect for them. Your relationship will just deteriorate very rapidly. So, and it's very important to understand that the limits that you place on children are not something that impede the child-parent relationship, but actually further it substantially.
There are a few other topics discussed related to child rearing in this interview, but one that isn't discussed is rule number 5 from Jordan Peterson's book.
Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. This has sort of been a through line to at least the beginning part of our conversation.
Yeah, well, the first thing is, it's the monster thing, like the Beauty and Beast thing. You are not a good guy, and you will take revenge on your children if they misbehave. You think, oh no, I like my children. It's like, other people might not like them. Maybe they don't behave very well, you know, and you think you like them because you're a saint, but you're not. And you will take revenge on those children if they do things that make you dislike them. So you're in the grocery store and you've got a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old's pretty smart, checking you out all the time, like poking you and prodding you and seeing what's there, because that's what little kids do. They're not that verbal. So they're like, they have, you could compare their behavior in some ways to pack animals like dogs, which is why they like dogs and get along with dogs. They understand each other, you know.
See, with animals, you can't pretend that you are confident. You can only do that with humans. You can wear a suit and look confident, and humans will buy something. But in the animal world, it's not what you're wearing. It's not how you posture in yourself. It's how you feel. So they don't know what you're saying. They just know how you feel. So if you're nervous, that's what you're saying. If you're anxious, that's what you're saying. You know, that's why I always talk about calm and assertive. If you don't want to feel anxious, what's your next option? Calm your anxiety. Just learn to be calm before you learn to tell a dog what to do. Because it's about being calm first and then confident. So it's the emotion and then it's the mind.
That's what archetypal stories are. They're the description of what you already know. But that can be articulated, and then who you are and how you see yourself and the way you describe yourself all become the same thing. So that's wonderful. Then you're not at odds with yourself, you know? And then then you're a functioning unity, and that makes you much stronger and more indomitable than you would otherwise be.
Well, that was fun. I don't know about you, but I enjoyed that. I admit that last one was a bit of a stretch, but I think you get the point. And I'm going to tell 3 stories now that relate to what we just saw. So a decade ago, when I worked for a high-tech metrology company, I worked with a professor, a scientist, like hardcore scientist. His job was to come up with mathematical algorithms for how to detect infrared light sources to within microns for brain surgery and for manufacturing. And we would get into a lot of discussions of materialism versus Christianity and those types of discussions. But he would tell me stories about his family. And I remember one time he was telling me about how his love for his daughter was a neurochemical soup in his brain that was just compelling him to love her in a deterministic way. And then he revealed to me that he actually, and these were his words, hates that conceited little bitch. He despises her and can't wait until she leaves. So this touches on Jordan's point about not letting your children do things that will make you dislike them. This gentleman had bragged about having a very permissive environment for his children, was very nihilist in his world outlook, and I think he had the impression that these were just sort of the teenage years, but the degree to which he expressed his dislike for his daughter was somewhat shocking and appalling to me. And I would suggest to you that if you have a 16 or 17-year-old daughter that you hate and that you only provide for because you feel compelled by some biological imperative, that perhaps you've allowed your child over the course of many years to develop behaviors and attitudes that have caused you to dislike them. And that's on you as much as it's on the child. It's not all on the parent. It's not all on the child. But there's an interaction there. And it's an interesting story. The next story is a story about my sister. She has a German Shepherd that she takes care of. It's locked in a large kennel, and it cannot be brought around other dogs or around other people. This German Shepherd was the pet of a disabled woman who got around in a wheelchair. She was very sick, full of a lot of negative emotion. And the German Shepherd rightly assumed that it was essentially in charge in most situations. And to put a German Shepherd in that situation is really unfair. In its desire to protect its owner, it became very reactive and vicious towards other dogs and other people. The problem got so bad that the dog was brought to my sister. She was able to get the dog to see her as a parental figure, but she wasn't able to make any progress with the dog beyond that. And so what she did, and she's done this all her life, and this is what Cesar does as well, is she took the dog in and she gave the disabled woman one of her favorite dogs, a golden retriever. And now her, my sister, and my niece take care of this German Shepherd. And its entire life is about protecting. And so what they've done is they've gotten it some kittens. And the way this dog protects and takes care and fawns over these kittens, you'd never know how vicious it was, because you wouldn't understand that it depends on the situation. So What I would submit to you is that if you do not provide your dog with the appropriate environment and the appropriate boundaries, rules, and limitations, and they develop into a dog that cannot coexist with other people and other dogs in human society, and that dog comes under threat of destruction, well, I propose to you that that is animal abuse. I don't understand the people who object in a knee-jerk fashion to the communicative touch as one of the best methods to get an immediate result, to train an immediate result for a dog to look to you for guidance. Why people call that animal abuse and then will basically bury their heads in the sand or shrug their shoulders when a dog that wasn't given appropriate boundaries, rules, and limitations becomes unmanageable, dangerous, and has to be destroyed. It's a real sticking point for me, as I think you can probably tell. And the final story I want to tell is a few years ago. Perhaps this is too personal, but oh well. I was involved in a serious relationship with a young woman who had a 5-year-old daughter. And the relationship got pretty serious. It went on for some time. And this mother had breastfed her daughter until she was 4.5 years old. She had also convinced her daughter, who was extremely intelligent, I'm talking like genius IQ, that she was a fully fledged adult capable of making her own decisions by the time she was age 5. And I can only tell you that I'd never seen the dysfunction that kind of permissive, no discipline, avoiding the reality of motherhood, that codependent sickness, what it can create in a child, the kind of abuse that is. And I saw it firsthand. For example, we'll call her Margaret. Margaret would constantly have temper tantrums during the day. She was always upset, and it seemed to be as much of a biological issue as it was a temperament or a psychological issue. Well, one night it's 2 in the morning and I have insomnia, and I come downstairs to have a smoke, and I go outside and I have my smoke, and when I come back in, what do I find? But Margaret has stacked 2 chairs on top of each other, and she is standing on the backrest of the top chair while they both wobble precariously. She's got her hand up on the fridge, and she's reaching into the candy jar that's supposed to be out of reach up on the fridge, and she's just stuffing her face. It's like a cartoon. It's one of the most horrifying and comical things I've ever seen a child do, because the possibility of a fall and a serious injury was very real. Not to mention just this behavior is not good. And suddenly we had an explanation for the tantrums and the problems during the day, is that Margaret had been sneaking downstairs at 2 in the morning and just stuffing her face full of candy while her mother slept. I brought this up with her mother after having, caught Margaret and brought her up to her mother and said, this is what she was doing. And there was no discipline. There was a kind of, oh, Margaret, and please, don't do that. And that was about it. And then I became Margaret's arch enemy. In one case, I called, say I was on my way over, and came in the house and headed up to the rec room. And as I got near the top step, I took a step and just excruciating pain into my foot. And I lift my foot up, and there are 3 needles that have plunged halfway into my foot. They were arranged very carefully on the stairs. And I look over, and there's Margaret, and she's got a that's what you get kind of look on her face. And I look over to her mother, who's watching TV, and I say, are you aware that your daughter just positioned a booby trap for me to step on and injure myself because I caught her stuffing her face with candy the other night? And the mother's response again was, oh, Margaret, were you playing with mommy's sewing kit again? Remember, you have to put all of those back. Like there was just an obliviousness to how serious that is if a child's doing that at age 5. And I understand jealousy, and I understand someone new comes in and disrupts the environment, but the only way to deal with that is if you have the cooperation of both people that are taking a parental role. And unfortunately, I was the only one seeing a problem. And the fact that we couldn't agree on what to do about Margaret contributed greatly to us having to break up. Now, the last I heard from her was a few years later. She'd sent an SOS out onto Twitter and like Instagram asking if anyone had any information on how to deal with a child with horrific a sense of self-entitlement and a grandiose sense of self. She was at her wit's end, and she really didn't know what to do at this point. At that point, Margaret would have been 7 or 8. So, I mean, I have seen the results of not setting rules, limitations, and boundaries. I've seen the results of not applying a judicious manner of discipline to build strengthen the bond and the trust and the child's confidence that they can go out into the world and interact appropriately with the world. So when it comes to Cesar Millan, his academic critics don't like the fact that he talks about dominance, and they don't like the fact that he says pack leader. But those academics are drawing on academic papers that are based on the study of wolves in the wild and dolphins in captivity. And based on those papers, they make the point that positive reinforcement is a better way of getting an animal to do what you want it to do. But what they forget is that we don't have wolves as pets. Cesar did an entire hour-long show where he brought in a wolf expert to explain to everyone why wolves can't be your pet. They won't see you as a parental figure when they reach adulthood. At best, they'll see you as a partner. You can't take them on walks, and you don't want them greeting someone at the door. And to add to that, I've never seen anyone walking their pet dolphin, and I've never been met by a dolphin at the door. So I guess that's all I have to say about the judicious application of discipline for children and for canines. But I will add that I think you should go watch this full interview on Iceland's Channel 2 with Thor, because I think Thor is a great example of an interviewer who was challenging. He was very challenging to Jordan, but the way that he challenged Jordan was in the classic, proper journalistic way. He asked direct, probing questions, the types of questions that people who might have only just heard of Jordan vaguely or heard of his rules vaguely would be asking, you know. And I think it was a great interview. Jordan responded appropriately to that kind of respectful challenging. So go check it out.